Hello, this is Quinntessential Comix. I'm Alice Quinn. Welcome to our book club. Unfortunately, the people who are joining us today got sick and had other stuff come up, so it's just me today. But we can also chat in the chat box beside the screen if you're watching live, or just leave a comment below if you're watching later. Today we are discussing comic books. We were discussing the new issue, Abbott, from Boom Studios, and we're discussing Injection from Image. Okay, cool. So those are the comics. Full disclosure, this is a book club, so we'll be talking, and by we, I mean I'll be talking about the books. So if you haven't read them, there's spoilers ahead. Yeah, I right off the bat, I wouldn't be able to sort of make a recommendation, just because, like, I don't think either of these are quite, like, outstanding. But there's definitely interesting things I want to chat a little bit about. So first, we'll talk about Injection. So Injection's a graphic novel. So there's 5 issues in the first volume that we're looking at today, and overall, I enjoyed it. I don't think it was like outstanding, but it was interesting. I really liked the way the colorist worked with the characters. So, for instance, like how do I do this? So for instance, like the way the colorist and the artist showed the characters then and now was really good. Just in the sense of, like, this character, Maria, is the same person, but because of what she's gone through, you know, she's a little more weathered. You know, she's got more shadows, more darkness, whereas in you know, she's all like bushy-tailed and bright-eyed. I mean, except for the yellow eyes. The yellow eyes are a little weird, but, you know, maybe it's a thing. Maybe it's a thing that's not jaundice, but it kind of just looks like jaundice to me. But that's okay. Yeah, so I think the art is pretty good. The colorist is really good, too. Like, I really like how they differentiate, you know, when they're, like, even just, like, glancing at a page, you can see when they're describing a scene that happened in the past versus in the present. And it's really interesting, like, you can really get the sense of, like, there's something more going on. And I'm sure the story will sort of develop what else is going on as it continues, but you just get these little snippets of it, and they're really intriguing. So this page in particular, this stark black panel in between is really quite powerful. And it looks like it might even be a similar, like, it might even be the same illustration, but the way it's colored and the way it's shaded, the faces looks totally different and almost sinister with the blackness around his eyes. So, to be honest, if we were reading Injection as an issue and talking about it as just from, like, a one-issue perspective, I don't know if I would like it, just because the first issue is very, like, it's setting up the whole thing, but it's very vague. It's not telling us really what it's about. Hold on. Okay, I'm missing some comments in the chat. I'm just gonna go grab some. Hi, James. Hi, Elijah. The covers are gorgeous. Yes, we were thinking about jaundice. The supernatural gore. Elijah is talking in the chat about the supernatural gore. He says it's not quite beauty, but it's excellently done. The framing is great too. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna try to screen grab some of these, and I'll just put them up on the screen. But it seems like a lot of us are on the same page. which is great. Everyone wants to be on the same page. As far as the story, I do like. Oh, that's the whole page. Okay, well, I'll show it anyway. It's fine. It's fine. As far as the story, I like the. Too many things at once, guys. Oh, nope, forever. Stop that. Nope. That was no good. Okay. Capture section. Okay. And then put that on the desktop. Excuse me for a moment, guys. Okay. Let's do Microsoft Office. So yeah, this is some of what's going on in the chat right now. Yeah, so the story is like it's very vague, and it's interesting. It's like supernatural type stuff going on there, and it just seems like these 5 geniuses of different fields sort of came together and created like a genius think tank to look into the future. And I don't know if this was like specifically for governments or if it was specifically for other types of industry, but it seems it's still pretty vague why they can't, like, basically when they like looked into the future, there was nothing interesting going on. I'm like, well, it seems like there's like they've talked about innovation stagnating, which I don't really think is going to happen. I think that's kind of like they're doing it for the story, but I think that's kind of dumb. But so yeah, so they try to create something that will make the future more interesting, and in doing so, they create a monster, obviously. But the way the story is told is very back and forth in between the past and the future. It's very going from one perspective to another about it's going from these different people's perspectives. So okay, sorry, I've got a million things open right now. So this is the new one. Yeah, there's a lot of sci-fi coming out from Image right now, so there isn't too much that's setting this one apart, other than the fact that it's got like this really diverse cast of characters that all have different sort of backgrounds. The injection itself, I can't really get a really great pop-out chat. Hold on. This will be better. This will be better. No, not really. That's fine. That's fine. Let me see if this will work, guys. I have an idea. Boom. Okay, cool. I don't have to screen share it. I can just show it to you guys. So the injection itself, I don't really know what it is. Like, they haven't shown enough of it for me to really have an opinion on what it is. It just seems like they created an AI and then put a soul in it through magic. So, Elijah says it's a monster with a god complex and a child's temper. And it's like, okay, cool. But so far, all we've seen it do is sort of create this mythical folklore stuff that's popping up in real life. So they find a stone and they think it has acoustic properties, and then it turns this lab upside down. But at this point, because it's in a lab, because it's contained within research, I don't see it as a threat to the world at large. And I think that's kind of what's missing from this comic, because everything sort of feels like it's contained within a bubble. Right? These guys, they're all from different fields, but they're working in this think tank, and it's sort of outside of government, it's sort of outside of companies. But how did they get together, and what are they really working for? That's not really explained. Are they? Yeah. And then because the thing they found was in a mine, brought to a lab, and then when it escaped, it went to an abandoned factory. None of these things are part of society and part of everyday life, and so the threat doesn't feel real. And I mean, that could just be the monster itself saying, oh, it's not about society at large. It's specifically about fucking with these 5 people who created it. So, I mean, that might be what it is about. Excuse the word salad. But there isn't really a sense of urgency and danger, something when I think about that, I think about God is Dead, which might be another Image one where you actually see cities being destroyed. You actually see the real effects in the world, right? And even though it's whatever, it's real effects in the comic world, it has effect. So this was interesting, but similar to what people are saying in the chat, there's so many Image sci-fi books. So is it really all that great? What really sets it apart? I don't know. I don't really have a great answer for you on that one. I'm gonna take it back to the chat so you guys can see it. It should have updated. Ooh. James, they have a lot of sci-fi stuff. So there's just a lot. Black Science, I think, was one of the interesting ones they did last year that had a lot of say, but it just seems like every other comic is a sci-fi thing or real world with some magic stuff in it. I think if you go and you look at the books we've read on this book club, half of them are Image sci-fi stuff. So I totally get it. Okay, so I'm looking at Unabridged Gamer right now. So we'll see. Yeah, there's more than one volume. I think there's 2 full volumes out right now, and it seems like they'll develop into a bit later. Elijah disagrees that the pacing is good. It's what they're going for. He says it's very Westworld-esque. So it's all right. Opinion. There's some like I said, the art's great. I really like the way that the colorist works with the subject matter. Yeah, I just maybe if I'm in a different mood and maybe if I have more of the volumes, those omnibus editions where they have 10 issues in a volume. But I can tell it is sort of slowly building. But just for me, I'm it's interesting, but there's nothing really specific that's grabbing me to it, If there was a character I could seriously relate to, maybe I would have more patience to see where the story is going, but they're all really kind of out there. They're very yeah, I don't know. So maybe just a personal thing. It seems like other people like it. We'll go back to the chat for a second. Yeah, so this is kind of a trend recently with comics, is they know people aren't reading it by the issues. They're reading it in graphic novels at, like they're buying the graphic novels, or they're going to the library and picking up 3 or 4 of the graphic novels at the same time. So they're just not interested in supporting that serialized flow where, you have sort of a cliffhanger or you have like a mini adventure in every issue. That's not really what they're interested in doing, and like that's okay. That's a different type of storytelling, and I can see how this comic is like right up people's alley. Like there's some pretty good talent on it, so like it's like Warren Ellis, I think yeah, he's pretty cool. Everyone really likes him. He's one of the big guys in comics right now. Or has been for the last like 10 years or so. So, yeah. It's just not my cup of tea, but I don't think it's bad. I just think, you'll need a little more time to get into it, and maybe knowing that, you'll have more patience going in. That's all I have to say about Injection. I'm going to go back to the chat and see if there's anything else. Been a trend for 15 years. Yep. Oh, James has read it. Yeah, it's kind of annoying when you read it, like when, someone's like, oh, it's a sci-fi book from Image, but they all sort of blend together in your mind. But yeah, I think the decal of Injection is cool. There's a point where they all get a tattoo of it, and I was like, oh, that's cute. But yeah, other than that, I was like, meh. I have some stronger feelings about Abbott. So we're going to move on to that one. I'm going to give the chat a minute to give me any last comments. Any final words? No, doesn't look like there's any final words. That's fine. Yeah, the only way you'll differentiate it is the sci-fi by Warren Ellis. Okay, cool. So Abbott, I wasn't quite sure what to expect with Abbott because it was recommended, but I tried to go into these things blind. Because of the cover, I thought it would be some mystical sci-fi stuff, and I was like, okay, cool. And this looks like some fresh talent. Like, I don't know these. I think I know Jason Jordie, but I'm not even sure if I do. Like, this looks like some fresh talent up here, which is nice. We want interesting, the only way we'll get diverse stories and interesting perspectives is if we have diverse creators and people sort of, writing about things that aren't the status quo. And so, yeah, so this one, to be honest, I really liked how it began, and I wasn't quite happy with how it ended. So it begins like this. This is the first page of the comic, and it's setting a scene here. It's Detroit. It's 1972. There's a lot of tension between the different populations. There's the white population and the black population, and they're sort of setting the tone and the scene. And I was like, cool. And it also helps that the coloring of the story, all of their outfits, and here I'll show you another image. All of their outfits and stuff are really sort of period appropriate in terms of the color and the style. So the scene is set pretty well. I'm just going to go ahead and say my major gripe with it, because that way people in the chat will have a second to respond. I did not like how there was a mystical element in this book, because, it's about this, I can't remember her first name, Viola or something? Elena Abbott. And it's about her, and she's a female black reporter in Detroit, and she works for one of the major newspapers that's not aimed at the black population, it's aimed at the white population. And, she's she published this, like, they published this controversial article where about police brutality and how these police guys killed a little black boy. And the publisher, like her editor, totally backed her up because, you know, the evidence was there and because it was the truth, but it's ruffled a lot of feathers. And so that's how this stage is sort of set. And it's like, oh, this is interesting. This is cool. And then the comic goes on to like explain that there's like a new case and there's a like a horse head, and the way they show it, and they're like, oh, you know, obviously you can tell there's something different. There's something going on here. Like, whoa, like that's not the coloring of the rest of the book. Like that's not how the rest of the book looks. And it's obviously they're doing that for a purpose. But basically my major gripe is that, like, I think this would have been interesting on its own without having to involve mystical stuff. Like, it's not clear what kind of mystical stuff it is by the end of the first issue, but it's clear that there is mystical stuff. And I'm like, I think this would have been really, like, I was already drawn in by this character of someone who, you know, wants to spread the truth, who wants to build up their community, who wants, you know, her people to have a chance to succeed and for equality to be real. And I think that's, like, really poignant to stuff we're facing right now in our society and things we, you know, things we've sort of hidden from ourselves as a society, but like are still there. Racism's still a thing. And it's not cool. And so like, I don't think this comic needed that mystical element, especially because like we said, there's so much sci-fi and magic in a lot of comics. I think it could have just been like played straight. And I think it would have been much better. But that's my opinion. That's my major gripe. I'm going to go to the chat and see what they say because maybe they disagree with me. Who knows? Ooh, a Billie Holiday bio comic. That sounds interesting. Yeah, so this is like one of those trends that's happening in comics now, like, because, you know, something was successful, like everything started trying to emulate that, right? So the big success in the last like 7 years has been Saga, and that's dealing with sort of societal issues, but in a fantasy setting. So I think a lot of comics are trying to sort of ride on that success. But it just feels like it's all the same stuff, like nothing's standing out. And now they're just talking about moonshine, which is cool. But yeah, Abbott's powers are pretty unclear. Like I showed with the panel, it just like sort of showed she had some sort of spidey sense thing. Literally, it just looks like Spider-Man's spidey sense. And yeah, so, you know, it's really interesting. I really like, there's the things that I like about this comic are the mundane things. You know, she likes having, like, there's a lot of things that are established about her in this first issue. I really appreciate that because when they have a first issue, they really have to set the scene, they have to set the characters, they have to draw you in. And I don't think the mystical stuff was the hook for me. I think her character was the hook. You know, she talks a lot about routine. You know, her boss offers her a drink and she's like, no, I have one bourbon at the bar when I go at the end of the day, and I got one bourbon at night. And it's like, all right, well, this is a woman who likes it, you know, likes her routine, likes it clear cut. She goes to the same diner every day. They know her at the diner. And so like, I really like that. And I also really like how it's got this background of a city that's at odds with each other. And like Detroit nowadays is like a literal hellhole. So it's kind of interesting. It's set in Detroit in the 70s because like there's a lot of optimism in these people in building their communities because they're like, oh, we're making our own opportunities, like, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. I like the art. I'm going to show you on the other page just because I like it. And, you know, I like the art. I like the the coloring, you know, it's sort of not super even, and I like that. It's sort of got this sort of like patchwork setting. Even the backgrounds aren't solid. They're sort of I don't really know the artistic term, but they're sort of like, I don't know, sponged. I don't know. I'm not really good with art stuff. Yeah, and so like this issue is like, it's interesting, and like in one sense I'm interested to see where it goes, because it starts off with this like horse mutilation. It ends off with a murder of this black guy, and there's only like, when they find the body, there's only half the body, and you know, the one black guy on the force calls Elena Abbott, being all like, hey, no, they're going to call this a suicide. They're going to write it off if nobody's there looking at it. And, you know, calls her in so she can write a story about it and get the truth out, because otherwise they're just going to, like, bury this case. So that's sort of the setup for the series. And I think it'll be really interesting. But like I said, I have, at this point, like, I'm not really interested in this mystical stuff. So, especially because, like, there's probably a lot to dive into with the crime itself, you know? And I really like this editor character who's, you know, trying to appease his bosses, but at the same time believes in truth, believes in freedom. He's like, yo, I didn't fight Nazis to come here and have to deal with these racist assholes. And I'm like, that's great. It's awesome. So I really, like, there's some interesting characters in here, and I think Elisha in the comments talked about her ex. Like, she's got some problems. She's got some issues, like baggage, like this guy she met who was super in love with her or whatever. I'll show you the panel. I'll show you the page. Was like, oh, there's weird stuff going on. And I'm like, why weird stuff? So tired of weird stuff. So, but yeah, overall, I did like it. I'm just kind of tired with, it just seems so much. Yeah, okay. I'm going to go with Elijah on this one. I do like mystical, supernatural sci-fi stuff. It just needs to have a purpose. And I feel like in this case, in the case of Abbott, I think it's distracting from the story itself. Like, I want the story to be about, you know, this woman fighting for truth. You know, these people in the community, like, trying to build a community and build a life for themselves where they are equal, where they are given as much opportunity as the people on the other side of town. So for me, with this comic, the mystical stuff is sort of distracting from what I feel is the story. And if the story isn't about these people in this community, then the mystical stuff needs to be more front and center, and that needs to be sort of what it's about. Just because the story opens up, and the background of the story is she's just gotten flack because she's written this article, you know, calling out racism and injustice against Black people. And I'm like, great, that's what the story is going to be about. But if it's going to be about mystical stuff, then it should have opened up with, oh, they think she's crazy because she wrote an article about this mystical stuff going on, but it turns out she was right, or whatever. So yeah, James is agreeing with me in the comments. I'm just going to put that up on screen. You don't really necessarily need to mix genres, you know? You know, in some cases it works, and it's a lot of fun, but I feel like nowadays people are just doing it because everybody else is doing it. It's not like these things are really integral to each other and building that story. They just seem kind of separate. The second issue is out, so, you know, maybe they do sort of, after the first issue, they do heavily focus on one or the other. and they yeah. So, you know, like there's some pretty good, like solid, just like true crime, like detective stories in comics. And I really like those. But you know, a lot of them aren't getting the sort of publishing, like the purchasing numbers they need to keep publishing them. I really like Brubaker and Epping's Velvet. I think it's phenomenal. The art is amazing. The characters are really interesting and like complex, and the story is just like great. And it follows sort of like almost a typical noir storyline, except the main character is female. And I really love that book, but they stopped, like, after I think the 3rd volume, they stopped publishing them. They said they're going to come back, but like, who knows? And it's because nobody buys that stuff. Everyone buys the detective story that also happens to be a mystical story. So the point is, start just buying straight up detective stories. None of this mixed genre stuff. Sorry, this is really funny. It's Die Hard mixed with Harry Potter. Yeah, Parker's really good too. There's like a lot of really good, like, straight crime comics. And you know what? Maybe like when those were coming out, because like Parker and Criminal, and there's a bunch of stuff that came out around the same time that was like comic, that was like sort of detective story, kind of comic noir. So maybe like 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, when all this stuff was coming out, people were like, we're so tired with crime, let's mix it up a little, let's put some mystical stuff in there. And now we're sort of in that moment where sort of everybody was thinking about churning out these sci-fi, mystical, supernatural stuff at the same time. And so we're just seeing the result of all that. So yeah, people are just coming up with new comics in the chat. Yo, Elijah, James is a really good artist. You guys could totally work together on that comic. I would totally read Harry Potter and the Curse of Yakatomi Plaza. That sounds wonderful. You guys should work on it. I'll invest. Give me a call. I'll have my lawyer draw up something. Yeah, so it's sort of like another reason why I wanted to do these these book clubs, like once every 2 months instead of once every month, just because like at this point, like I feel like the industry's on the verge of another evolution, where we're just at the starting point of another like great something, because we're at the end of sort of this like supernatural burst, you know, and you know there was like a boom and bust of superhero stuff. They keep trying to bring that back and keep that forever. So yeah, that's sort of why I wanted to do these every 2 months, just because I want there to be something really interesting, something so juicy that I'm sitting here talking for an hour and a half and I can't stop talking about how amazing this comic is. And if you guys know of those comics, if something has come to you and you're like, I'm reading this and it's amazing, and nobody's reading it and you have to check it out, like, please tell me. Let's read that in book club. Because I'd love to sit here and be like, this is amazing, you have to read it. But like, if it's not, you know, making you feel that way, I'm not going to say that. You know, and so, you know, sometimes you find inspiration elsewhere. Right now, personally, I'm really digging this manga called Princess Jellyfish, and it's really great. There's like cross-dressing, there's a bunch of like older fangirls who never leave their house, you know, fashion. It's weird, it's fun, I love it. But that's not like, I don't think we read mangas here. I mean, we did read One Punch Man once. So, but yeah, let me know, like, in Facebook, in YouTube, what are you reading right now that's like really different, that's really innovative, that's sort of like out there, you know, maybe it's pushing the boundaries of like what's socially acceptable, because let's read those, you know. I think this is pretty much going to be it. If there was another person, this would be an hour-long show, but it's just me talking to the chat. James wants us to read Mr. Miracle issue 7. I'm not sure why issue 7, but maybe we'll read it. Yeah, Elijah, didn't you miss Giant Days? We talked about that. It was great. Yeah, you should get Princess Jellyfish. It's wonderful. It's really cool. Also in North America and Canada, they published 2 volumes in one, so it's like a mega volume, which is great. You just get all the manga. And yeah, so our next book club, let me check this out. Our next book club is going to be in about 2 months' time on, I'm just pulling up the note. Pardon me. Probably going to be on May 16th, Wednesday, May 16th. If you want to join, I post the event on Facebook, and then I use that event to poll which graphic novel and which new issue we should read. I might just, like, you know, let me know how you feel about this, because at this point I'm not sure. Like, I'm thinking about just dropping the idea of new issues, just because, as it was mentioned earlier before, a lot of people aren't reading comics serialized, and a lot of creators aren't writing them to really be read in a serialized manner. So we can switch it up. We can do whatever you guys want. But on Facebook, we vote on which books we'll read. So usually I put up about 5 options. I try to pick suggestions and recommendations that are from a variety of publishers and sort of have a variety of subject matter. And then whatever gets the most votes is what we pick and what we'll read for the book club. And so that's a way you can interact with us. You can also do what these guys are doing and hop into the live chat. And yeah. So yeah, a lot of the stuff that's been like really interesting and refreshing, like, isn't getting published because people aren't buying it. So there's some pretty good stuff here. There's some pretty good stuff. So I'm going to take a bunch of these suggestions and put them in next month, like next book club's poll. And basically you vote for one or others that you would be interested in reading and discussing. If you want to join the video chat, you just message me, Alice, through either the YouTube or Facebook pages, and just be like, hey, I want to be in the video. And I'm like, sure. And basically all you need to have is like an internet connection that's stable and webcam, microphone type setup. It doesn't have to be super fancy or whatever. And then if you don't, like, you know, if you don't have the ability to do that or you don't want to, that's cool. You could join the live chat when we have the discussion. And so it's sort of accessible. Yeah, so that's the end of the chat. Thanks, guys. It's been really great. Like, this was not as bad as I thought it would be, because I was like, oh man, I'm just gonna be talking to myself. But no, I got to talk to you guys. So thanks, you're awesome. You guys should go check out The Unabridged Gamer on YouTube, and you should go and buy James Edward Clark, his comics. They're great. Get the whole Evil series. I have them signed. They're great. Yeah, so I'm Alice Quinn. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any opinions, please write them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. All right, thanks. Have a good one.